Welcome to the Salt Lake City Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond Ask Me Anything or AMA event. My name is Brian Young from Salt Lake City TV and host of Capital City News, and I'll be your moderator today. For the next hour, we'll be streaming live and asking for your questions about the Parks Bond before you. Joining us this afternoon are Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall, City Council Chair Dan Dugan, who also represents City Council District 6, and the city's public lands planning manager and Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond specialist, Tom Millar. Tom is going to lead us off with a short presentation about the bond, which is on the ballot this November for all Salt Lake City residents, after which our three esteemed guests are going to be answering your questions. To submit a question at any time during this event, use the comment feature on Facebook, and city staff are going to get those questions to us. I'd like to add one caveat about this live stream, though. Salt Lake City representatives in today's event, including elected officials, cannot advocate for or against the bond. This will be a purely informational update, and we will only be able to answer questions that are able to provide you with that information. A recording of today's event will be available soon on the official Salt Lake City Facebook page and our YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube SLC Gov on YouTube. So without further ado, with your presentation, take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Brian. We're all very happy to be here today to talk to you about the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond. The first question that we're going to answer is one that we get quite often, which is, what is the bond going to pay for? This November, Salt Lake City voters are going to have the opportunity to vote on this Parks, Trails, and Open Space General Obligation, or GO bond. The bond provides the opportunity to build on existing public lands investments to enhance this system. If passed, the city plans to fund 8 significant projects across the city that are shown in this map and described in greater detail on the project website, slcparksbond.com. The bond projects were identified through public input, your public input, the priorities expressed in the Reimagine Nature Public Lands Master Plan recently adopted in 2022, preliminary polling data, geographic distribution, equity and levels of public land service across the city, and the mayor's 2022 plan. Project budgets plus a 20% contingency for any of those projects adds up to $85 million. The bond funding, if approved, will implement components of that Reimagine Nature Master Plan. Highlights include helping to construct the new Glendale Regional Park at the old Raging Waters Water Park site on 1700 South, creating new parks, including playgrounds and trails in Glendale and the Granary District, where there are currently very few green spaces to play in, updating aged facilities and increasing community identity for at least one neighborhood park, trail, or open space in each city council district, and improvements at Allen Park, Fairmont Park, and Liberty Park. It would also fund improving degraded waterways to enhance water quality, pollinator habitat, and migratory nesting grounds. It would complete the connection of the Folsom Trail to the Jordan River Parkway Trail and add landscaping and additional trail amenities to that project. It would increase the city's tree canopy and plant biodiversity and restore natural landscapes in parks and open spaces that use less water and are adapted to our arid climate. All of these bond-funded projects include comprehensive community engagement to determine the final design and the implementation plans before construction begins. Before any park, trail, or open space is redesigned or rebuilt, the city will ask you, the community, for feedback on how to understand and how to design each project so that these public spaces are built and better serve all of our neighborhoods and all of us. Public lands values this community input, as well as the master plans that have gone before it, and planning best practices that will be used to inform the decisions for each project and determine how improvements are prioritized. Planning and other critical steps for some of the projects to be funded by the bond are complete, those shown here, and others shown on the next slide will begin very soon. These projects are basically the ones that are more ready to go than the others, and ones that you'll see improvements to very quickly if the bond is passed. You can view the Glendale Regional Park Vision Plan online. You can also follow along on the Allen Park Adaptive Reuse and Management Plan, which is anticipated to begin this fall. The Liberty Park Playground and the Jordan River enhancements will begin fairly shortly if funding is approved by voters. If funding is approved, other projects, those shown here, will proceed with more planning and public engagement opportunities before construction or design begin. Those include the completion of the Folsom Trail, reimagining neighborhood parks, trails, and open spaces, improvements to Fairmont Park, and a new fleet block park in the Granary District. We also get this question a lot: why is bond funding being considered? Why don't we just use our existing budgets? Currently, about 26% of the city's general fund budget comes from property taxes. Of the total general fund budget, approximately 18 million is allocated to fund the public land system, but much of that budget is directed to the maintenance of the existing system rather than building new assets like the ones we're talking about in this bond. Additionally, from 2010 to 2020, Salt Lake City grew by about 7%, adding approximately 13,000 new residents, and that is awesome. Our 2019 Public Lands Needs Assessment identified a need, therefore, for an additional 94 acres of outdoor space, public lands, to avoid overcrowding our existing parks and to increase the level of service citywide. If approved, bond funding would help the city add more usable park and public land space in multiple locations, helping to spread the demand by making parks more accessible and by replacing that aging infrastructure that currently requires a lot more maintenance than new infrastructure does. If the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond is not approved by voters, the Public Lands Department will continue to receive that annual budget for maintenance and small improvements, while continuing to seek opportunities to fund the proposed improvements from this bond through other means. The department typically receives some capital improvement program funding each year, which is specifically targeted to replace or expand the city's existing public lands infrastructure. If Public Lands relies only on this CIP funding and other grants, the city will continue to respond to these public priorities for public lands at the existing pace that we are today. Currently, the Salt Lake City Public Lands system boasts more than 1,800 acres of natural land, 865 acres of parkland, 3 event parks, 2 regional parks, 15 community parks, 19 neighborhood parks, 42 mini parks, over 70 miles of trails, 7 golf courses, the regional athletic center, and more than 90,000 public trees. That is awesome, an awesome system. This averages out to about 13.5 acres of parks and natural areas per 1,000 residents, and there are about 200,000 people in Salt Lake City. Comparably sized cities like Boise, Idaho, and Des Moines, Iowa, have 18 acres per 1,000 residents and 19 acres per 1,000 residents, respectively. If the bonds are approved by voters and all are issued at the same time and not taking into account the existing bonds that will be paid off over time, the estimated property taxes to pay the bonds would be approximately $53.80 per year, or less than $5 per month, on an average primary residence valued at $576,000, which is the median value. That would equate to a little bit over $97 per year for a business or a secondary residence of that same value. If the bonds are approved by voters and if they're issued in 2 or more installments over the next couple of decades, and depending on market conditions, it is possible that the cost of the bonds would not increase the existing property tax burden. If the bonds are not approved by voters, the property tax burden would decrease over time as a result of other general obligation bonds being paid off. So here are some important dates to know as you decide, Salt Lake City voters, on how this bond will proceed. The public hearing and public meeting events during city council meetings were successful, and those occurred in the last couple of weeks. And we thank all those that expressed their opinions in those events. Everybody should have received their mail-in ballots in the mail by now. If you have not, please contact the Salt Lake County Clerk's Office. Other critical dates, whether you're voting by mail or in person, are included in this slide, as well as the slcparksbond.com website and slc.gov/elections. We invite everyone to learn more about the bond and its associated projects, to register to vote, and to vote. We would love for you to stay informed with future updates as well. If you're not already registered to vote, please visit vote.utah.gov to get started. The online voter registration deadline is this Friday, October 28th. The register by mail deadline must be received by this Friday, October 28th. And the in-person registration deadline is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022, which is also Election Day. If you're just now registering and desire to vote by mail, please make sure that you request a mail-in ballot from the Salt Lake County Clerk, or plan to vote in person either before Election Day or on Election Day itself. Lastly, we would love to invite you to stay informed, to reach out to us for more information, to sign up for the Salt Lake City Public Lands newsletter, which will help keep you involved in all of these projects as they proceed. Thanks.
All right. The first question I'd like to bring in Mayor Mendenhall and Council Chair Dugan. Thank you both for joining us for this. Can I get you two to explain why you think the bond is needed?
Sure, I'll go first. As Tom just said, we've added about 13,000 residents in the last 10 years, but I'll tell you, just last year, Salt Lake City permitted over 4,100 new units in the city, and those are probably not all going to be occupied by single individuals. So we are adding thousands of new residents every year at this point. Most of that is vertical development. And as we grow the density of our city, the proximity to open space is one of the major quality of life issues that a city can actually control. While we can't control the marketplace directly when it comes to housing and jobs that are available, parks, trails, and open space, we can. And we've been talking with voters for a long time. In fact, we did 2 polls leading up to the city council deciding to put this on the ballot. And both of those polls had resident support around above 60%, some around 70% of residents saying, yeah, we would consider paying more in our property taxes essentially in order to have better parks and more access to parks and trails. And I think when we look also a little farther back to the pandemic, we saw park usage go up 42% across the city and trail usage go up about the same, about 40%. And that has remained at that level essentially since the pandemic began. It was like, as Salt Lakers, we remembered just how much we need and want our shared public spaces. So the beauty of this is that the voters ultimately get to decide if we'll make this historic investment larger than we've ever made at one time in our shared open spaces, and make the first new regional park in the city in over 60 years. Since we only have Sugar House Park and Liberty Park, this would, as you know, give us that 3rd regional park on the west side of Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Mayor. The mayor really captured all of it in one nice, concise statement there. And I wanted just to focus that also one of our priorities is our residents' physical and mental health. And one way to make sure that we are staying healthy in body and spirit is with open space and parks. And we need to take care of that parks so our people can feel healthy, safe, and alive. And the parks and the open space are necessary for that to happen.
So we have some questions rolling in from Facebook, and the first we have from Samuel. And Samuel asks, what is the city's yearly budget for parks and open spaces? Is that something you can give us, Tom?
I believe so. Yeah, the city's annual budget for the Public Lands Department is about $18 million.
Okay. And then Samuel actually asked a follow-up question as well. It says that it seems like they've voted on a lot of bonds over the last few years. How can they see what other bonds are issued and outstanding? And not just at the city level, but is there a way to look at the county level and the state level as well?
That's a great question. On the website for the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond, if you just click on the FAQ tab, you can go down, scroll down to the bottom, and the final question that we commonly get asked is that very question. What outstanding bonds does the city have? And you can see those bonds on there dating back to 2010 and when the final payment is expected to be due on each of those bonds. And that's just for the city.
Can I jump back to the first part of Sam's question, which was around what the 18 million that is allocated for the Parks Department in the city and open space. And Tom said in the presentation, the majority of that is taking care of the existing parks that we have. This bond, as you know, would be the capital to build or enhance the new projects. But something really unique happened with the council budget decision this summer. If you think back to, let's see, 2018, the city increased our sales tax. And we asked residents if we're going to do this. I was on the council at the time. We said, if we're going to raise the sales tax, what do you want us to invest in? And they said, we want safer neighborhoods. We want more affordable housing. We want better transit service. And we want better streets, so street repairs. And this council, looking at that portion of the sales tax that we increased and the growth in the city that we're experiencing, decided to make a fifth bucket of money. And this is the first time, I think, at least in our lifetimes, that the city is dedicating ongoing revenue to maintenance of our parks. Whereas in all the budget history that I've been aware of, the Parks Division and now the Parks Department would have to compete every year for maintenance dollars. Now they're not going to receive everything that they need, but this new ongoing stream of sales tax funding will help us take care of all of the parks going forward.
And if we don't do that now, 5 years from now, it's going to be even more expensive to do that. And we're seeing that with the street side house. We need to make sure that we're staying proactive on our parks maintenance and upkeep.
One more question from Facebook at the moment. And if the bond passes, will this effort in any way generate no bid contracts for these projects? Is that something that's even possible?
No, I know Tom might be a better expert on parks contracts, but no.
Yeah, the short answer is nope. We'll still follow our same financial transparency and contracting best practices and make sure that we get accurate and competitive bids from the contractors and the consultants that are proposing on these projects.
So the next question is really about the bond process and what that's like. Bonds can, it seems like for residents who don't really get into this, into the weeds or at the level of detail that experts like yourselves are sort of forced to, being in the roles that you are, what does the bond process look like? And for you, Mayor and Council Chair, what are the different roles that the Mayor's office and the council have in getting something like this to the ballot?
Yeah, so the bond process starts in my office and around the new year. Typically, we take on the administrative side several months up through the very first Tuesday in May, at which point I have to finalize my budget proposal and hand it over to the city council, who then, according to state legislation, has until I think the 18th of June or somewhere around the middle of June to finalize that budget. So that tells you we're on a fiscal year calendar, which is July 1 to June 30th instead of a calendar year. And when we look at whether or not we want to bond on something, the first thing we look at is what other bonds we have out there and what our capacity is to take on more debt as a city. Salt Lake City, actually quite uniquely compared to other cities around the country, has a AAA bond rating, meaning our credit is so good it couldn't get any better. AAA is as good as it gets. So we have very competitive rates when we go out to bid or we go out to market with our bonds. But that doesn't mean that we don't take it very seriously. And it's a pretty seldom thing actually to have a general obligation bond go on the ballot. We haven't done it since, I believe, 2018, when we bonded about $87 million with the majority of voters approved a bond for street repairs. And that was to complement the ongoing sales tax revenue we just created to take care of our streets, and then the bond helped us build new ones for the worst ones. So it's not very often that you see a city bond on the ballot, but other levels of government, county and state, can put bonds on the ballot. And it's kind of like when you want to buy a house. Almost very, very few of us would ever have the cash on hand to pay for that house outright. But we know if we can lock in a good interest rate and we can have some good financing from a bank partner, then we can afford to do that big purchase. So that's the way the city uses bonds. And we've been relying on master plans, most recently the Reimagine Nature Master Plan that the community helped us literally reimagine what we see in our parks and open space to determine what a priority this was to the community and then which projects to throw onto the ballot. And Dan can talk about what the council's role is and their authority to change that up.
So in this last one, we got the list and we looked at the list as far as exactly what was on the list and how much money we wanted to allocate for each project. So we did some massaging that. We had some internal discussions. We also worked well with the mayor's staff on the proper amount and the proper wording for each of them. And you can take to the one, for example, was the parks throughout all the different districts. We didn't specifically name a park in each district because we want the districts and the residents' inputs in on that and have that as a collaborative effort on which area we want to focus on first. And part of this side of the house is, so we have this $85 million bond that we're voting on, but we can't use $85 million right away. So we may break it up into chunks, and then we're going to focus that money on what projects we can do as soon as possible. We already have master plans for some of them, so maybe they are focused on first, and then others may take more engagement and will be focused on second or third priorities. So we'll work with the mayor's office on prioritizing how we allocate that funding and where we allocate it.
And ultimately, I think you guys increased by just 5 million. We brought you an $80 million bond. And
Right, and we increased it by 5.
and the council talked about what you wanted to see, and they have the authority to change it like that.
That kind of folds into the next question. Where are all of these proposed projects and like how is that decided? And Tom, I don't know if you want to throw back up the slide that sort of has that map.
Yeah, I absolutely can.
Also, slcparksbond.com, and you can read a lot of information about projects and which master plans they come from.
Because as Tom's popping that up, Glendale, we're well on the way on the master plan there. And we've done a lot of work making sure that we have a good plan moving forward as soon as we get the funding.
So this map, Brian, can you see the map?
Yeah,
that
we can see it. I was just going to ask for you to kind of explain the reasoning behind these.
Yes, exactly. All of these projects came out of the community priorities that were expressed to us in the Reimagine Nature Master Plan that the mayor mentioned, as well as preliminary polling, making sure that we had appropriate geographic distribution and equity in levels of service. So where we saw neighborhoods that perhaps had public land space, but it wasn't very highly utilized, or it wasn't as well taken care of, or it wasn't programmed in a way that reflected the behaviors and the values of that neighborhood, that's where we've focused in on making sure that we're hitting the most impactful and most beneficial projects in each of these neighborhoods throughout the city, and not just focusing on the areas that have the highest use or the highest need, making sure that it's a much more holistic approach. So you'll see that projects 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are specific locations, and that project 2 is the project that the mayor and Councilmember Dugan talked about, which is having one of those neighborhood parks reimagined, at least one in each council district.
So another question that we get quite a bit, and I'm hoping one of you can kind of dispel this. There's the idea that the city already should be receiving increased revenue because of rising property values. So what would the need for this bond be? Can one of you tackle that?
I'll go first.
You go first.
Okay, so in the state of Utah, the laws of the state require any taxing entity to only take in whatever they took in basically the previous year. So if you're in a city that's not growing and your revenue remains the same, then that's pretty straightforward. But in a city like ours that is now in its 14th year of growth, in order to recognize that growth year over year, the city council is obliged, any city council is obliged, or county council, to do truth in taxation. And it happens every August in Salt Lake City for as long as I can remember, because we've been growing. And it obliges the city council to hold a public hearing and state very clearly how much they would be increasing the revenue essentially to capture that new growth. And our council and the politics of our city have been such that we really do it every year. We just plan to do it because we're always growing. And quite frankly, in other parts of the state and politics of other cities, it's not fun to do, and it's not fun for you guys, I know, but it's politically very difficult to do. And so some cities simply don't recognize their new growth and don't capture it, even though it's happening in their cities, because going through truth and taxation is so difficult. But we've found, and when I was on the council, that our residents want us to make that recognition so we can invest in the programs. So essentially, just because your property value is going up doesn't mean the city or the county are taking that revenue that they could, unless they go through truth and taxation. And I will tell you that the same growth that is contributing to our rise in property values has contributed to a rise in the need for city services on everything from building services, permitting, planning, 911 calls for service, graffiti removal, parks use, as I mentioned, is up 40%. There isn't a department in this city that hasn't had to grow to meet the growing needs of this city. And so one of the things that the council helped us determine in this last budget was the ability to grow those departments' personnel. About 90% of our city's budget pays paychecks. It's not paying for anything but really the people who are doing the work, picking up your trash, clearing the streets, answering the phone, 911, issuing building permits, doing inspections. So we're going to secure the people. We're asking the voters to decide if you want us now to grow your parks and open spaces.
Council Chair Dugan, did you have anything to add on that?
Well, just on the property side, so all the new building that adds to our property tax revenue. All the new building, all the new structures add to that property tax. Also, what adds to our revenue side of the house, which is also fluctuates and it's not steady, is the sales tax. And we've seen over this last year or so, the sales tax numbers have increased, but that can be volatile. You know, in the time of inflation, that can really increase a lot. In time of recession, it can then flatten out. But that is also part of our revenue side of the house. That's the volatile side of the house. The property tax side is more stable. So we're not, you know, we just had a small increase because we had more services needed, more residents here also in the city, and we also have some aging infrastructure that we need to take care of.
I think it's also unique in our capital city that well over 40% of the property in the city is non-taxable. So it's school-owned, church-owned, state-owned property that does not pay property taxes to us. And that's not the case. That ratio of so much of our property in the city being non-taxable is quite unique.
Tom, you had some you wanted to add on this?
Yeah, in addition to what the mayor and Councilmember Dugan shared, which is amazing, I'll just share sort of our perspective from public lands, which is that it's not just an increase in the use of public lands commensurate with the number of people that are moving into Salt Lake City, but people are changing the way that they experience and utilize public lands. And as their habits change, as their preferences change, as family sizes and family types change, it's also incumbent on us as city staff to change the services that we're providing those people as well. So in adding new service, perhaps even on top of service that already exists, that serves those different needs, that cost does have to come from somewhere. And that's essentially the purpose of the bond, is to fill those needs that were not previously present in the city, but that are above and beyond just the natural growth that we've experienced with people moving in and people's families getting larger.
A frequent question that has come in about the bond and all of this is really, we have all of these parks already. Some of them need help, some of them need maintenance. Why aren't we just fixing the things we have? Why are we looking to build more of this capacity? What would you say? What would you say to some of those folks?
Well, I'll first start off with, yes, we need to make sure we take care of what we have, and we got to keep that maintenance up. That's an absolute truth there. And it's so vital, so we don't get behind the power curve and then have to pay twice as much to fix something. But we also, when we look at the bond and we look at the parks, we have some holes in the city. If you look at Fleet Block, that area down in that southwest corner, they're void of a park, and they need some open space. They need some green space for that neighborhood and to revitalize that neighborhood. Other areas need additional green space because of the 40% increase in usage across the board. So they're getting overloved. So you need to make sure that they stay up to speed there. Glendale's was a great park at one time. We need to bring that back up because that just connects with the whole Jordan River, and it just becomes a wonderful avenue for the people's residents' health and well-being. So you can't just keep what you have and maintain that. The city's growing, so our parks needs to grow. And I'm not sure if there was a comment earlier, but we're 94 acres short of where we need to be, where it would be nice to be. So we need to add to that mixture across the city.
So these needs have been identified, and the city is very comfortable saying this is what the future of parks in the city needs. What happens if the bond doesn't pass? How does the city move forward in case this bond doesn't go through? How do we still get to those needs that we need?
So there's a portion of our budget that we call CIP because unfortunately there's a lot of acronyms in local government, but it means our capital improvement projects. And this bond, doesn't pay employees' salaries. It doesn't pay for maintenance. It's actually obliged to be for capital, which means new build or full replacement of things. So like when you saw Liberty Park on there, we would be, if the bond passes, we'd be removing the entire playground and putting in a new incredible playground. We'd be putting in new installations, and it's not about maintenance, but the sales tax increase, the growth rather, in that portion of the sales tax that we increased years ago is going to the ongoing maintenance. So this is something that actually our residents get to own. And the question therefore is basically, do you want to buy up better parks in the city? And do you want to buy up better access to those parks through trails and connections to them?
Council Chair, did you have anything to add on that?
The mayor hit it right on the head.
Okay. We have another question that came in from Reddit, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but if one of you would clarify on it, this bond isn't going to pay parks employee salaries?
No.
It's not allowed to.
No.
Legally not allowed to.
Okay, our next question is from Ben, and Ben asks, the proposed bond would improve at least one neighborhood park, trail, or open space in each council district, but what parks, trails, or open spaces have you heard residents want to prioritize for that funding? Are there already things that you're hearing about that sort of thing?
I think Tom's closest to that in the Reimagine Nature process.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, we've heard and continue to hear over many years the parks that are in most need of improvements. We do not have, as city staff, a list, public or secret, of which parks will receive funding through this proposed project, which in the bond is proposed for about $10.5 million. So a little bit less than an eighth of, or maybe almost exactly, an eighth of the funding. What we want is to make sure that those park improvements or open space improvements or trail improvements, it could be any of those three, we want to make sure that they meet the goals that people told us about when we were doing that engagement through that master plan. So this Reimagine Neighborhood Parks project or focus or goal was actually one of the highest community priorities in that master plan. People told us that they wanted these neighborhood parks, often maybe a little bit ignored or under-programmed or underloved, to better reflect the natural and historical, cultural and economic identities of the neighborhood that use those parks, and offering more high quality park experiences for everybody at that smaller scale. Targeting those underutilized parks can not only improve the quality of those spaces, but improve the quality of the neighborhoods that surround them as well. So improving landscaping, adding trees, increasing biodiversity, adding play features, adding new spaces for new uses. All of those options are on the table as we meet with the council, meet with the mayor, and meet with the community to determine what those improvements will look like. But ultimately, the city has not figured out what those are going to be yet. It's really up to you as voters to decide what that looks like and if funding for that is a priority for you.
Can I chime in on that? Because I should have more directly answered the previous question, and this is a segue to do that. If the bond didn't pass, you could see these projects go back to being in the queue of our CIP applications. And I think we can throw up a link on Facebook so people can go see what we funded through the capital improvement program. And a unique thing about it, and sometimes honestly a frustrating thing about it, is that city projects like led by city departments such as the Reimagine Nature Master Plan and the projects listed in there, or the Foothill Trails Master Plan or the Transit Master Plan, compete with neighborhood submitted projects. And they all come through a citizen-led process that's called the, again, an acronym, CDCIP board. Thank you to all the residents who volunteer on the CDCIP board. Check it out if you're interested. You could go to SLC Boards and Commissions website and apply. And they pour through all of these applications from city departments and from residents or community councils and score them according to, as Tom said, like the values that are directed by the city council's policy. And then ultimately the city council gets to decide which projects get funded. It's a really, always the need is far greater than the amount of CIP dollars we have. So the 8 big projects listed in this bond would just have to go through that process of CIP, and maybe some of them would get funded over time. Some of them may not. And frankly, being able to do a big project like the new Glendale Regional Park would be very difficult because of the size, the scope, the cost of a project like that to get through a CIP process without a bond. So we may not be able to see that happen. And I wanted to make another comment, which is not every acre of park per person in the city. And Tom at the beginning had that cool slide deck and talked about 13 or so acres per 1,000 people in the city. Look, not every park is as good as any other park. And I've studied parks across the country and the ratios of population density to access to a local park. And there are parks that are really just a grass field, and they're considered a park, and they can be counted just as much as a well-programmed, activated park with a ton of amenities that the neighborhood uses. So I think I'd want, and my intention with these proposals and what I want to see as a resident is not only that we have good access to open space, but that open space is great, that it really meets the needs of that local community, and that they become community activation gathering centers and places that we are proud of as Salt Lakers. So yes, ratios matter, but the quality matters in a big way. And that's a lot of what this bond is about.
And Brian, I just want to touch back on the 8 parks, or the parks around the whole city. And originally the mayor's recommendation was, mayor's staff's recommendation was $7 million to that one line item. And we increased it to $10.5 million because we also realized that these are the neighborhood parts of all the districts, and we wanted to make sure that there was funding there. And we also made sure that they weren't specifically saying which park in each city at this point, because we want to engage the whole neighborhood and the district in that decision on which parks means the most to them. And as far as District 6 is concerned, I've had a lot of residents come up to me and ask and tell me, hey, I think this park, Park A, Park B, Park C should be the one that gets the funding. So there's engagement is beginning now, and they're all seeing that they're excited about what this, the possibilities of improving and reactivating the parks in their neighborhood.
So we had another question come in, and Tom, I know you had a slide for it in your presentation. If you want to throw that back up again about the cost, but Mayor and Council Chair, I'm wondering if you two could talk about what the cost is to folks. And I know you both the mayor's office, you, Mayor Mendenhall, and the council took very seriously weighing how much this would cost and what benefit it would have the community. Could you talk about what that cost is to people, residents?
Sure, thanks. So Tom's got this great slide up here. So the median price in home is at $576,000. So for a primary property owner, his residential cost to him would be $5,380 per year. That's if we take the full $85 million bond and we issue it at one time. That's probably on the high side. We're probably going to issue it in different chunks. So that price will be actually lower because we can't spend all $85 million of that at once. We're going to have to parcel that out over time. And this is for 21 years. Private residents pay 55% of their full value of their homes in property tax. Commercial side pays 100%. So they're paying 100% of property tax on 100% of their full value. So that's why it's $97 for a commercial tax. Was that clear enough, or was that kind of foggy?
Yeah, no, I think that's clear enough. And if you want to take that slide down, Tom. The next question is, especially when you're, as you said, bringing the bond in sort of in phases, we're dealing a lot with cost increases now. We're dealing a lot with inflation. How that's really high now. Like, what contingencies are there in the bond to make sure that we don't, just to make sure that these projects get done at the price that we're stating?
Yeah, that's
Very good. So there was a 20% contingency fee on top of that embedded in that $85 billion.
so in other words, 85 of the 85 million, 20% of that, so approximately 17 million is contingency, expecting that costs will be higher than they were when we priced them out to take the project proposal to the council. And I'll make another homeowner analogy, but it's like if you took a home equity line of credit out, you've got, let's say, $100,000 of capacity. You're not probably going to spend $100,000 outright. You might put a new kitchen sink in, you might get a new bathroom remodeled, and slowly you do these projects and draw from that credit line. And similarly, the city can't go out and spend $85 million in one fell swoop. Just from even the competitiveness of the construction industry right now, it's very unlikely that would happen. So we will take it out in some chunks as we go, and we'll be evaluating if we need to refinance the bond, if the interest rates actually become better over the course of this 20-year bond, if that is possible. And our financial team is incredible. So if they see an opportunity for us to refinance a bond, that's something that we do on occasion here in the city. But regardless, there's 20% built in, anticipating the current inflationary costs.
And just to throw another twist here, we also have bonds that are retiring. So bonds that are retiring will be coming off that payment. So if we retire a bond and say that bond is, we're paying $1 a year, we retire that dollar and we're adding $1. So there could be a wash in that side of the house, but we are retiring some bonds. And so this $5 is as if nothing's retired and we're
Pulling it all at once.
pulling all $85 million at once at the current interest rates in the bond market. And both those things are, and you have to simplify it at that point, but our financial team is well versed on what's retiring and how much money we want to issue at what time. And that's done with also the administration on how much we can spend. What staffing do we have and what projects do we have to pay for that needs to be paid in so many years?
Tom, did you have something to add on this topic?
No, I think the mayor and Council Chair Dugan handled it awesome.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. And Tom, I wanted to start with you. If you have any final thoughts about the bond and the projects here that you think residents and voters need to hear about before we move on, beyond this.
Well, as the mayor mentioned earlier, there is a lot of information for each of these projects on the bond website. Again, that's slcparksbond.com. And if you click on projects, which is the first tab, you can learn about all 8 of those projects. And I encourage you to do that to learn more and then to decide for yourself whether you'll vote for or against the bonds. I just want to show real quick the ballot here. That's what it'll look like on your ballot. And so make sure you read through that. It talks about the cost. It talks about the results if those bonds are issued, and it talks about the results if those bonds are not issued. So the reduction in taxes that was mentioned earlier. And then finally, to make sure that you're registered to vote and to vote on or before November 8th. Thanks.
And then Council Chair Dugan, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to leave people with?
Kind of almost echoing what Tom said there. Do your research. The information that was presented and mailed out to all the residents is well written. It's deep. Talk to your friends and your families about this subject too, because it's a vital vote, and it requires you to vote the full ballot, because I think it's the last box you have on your ballot. It's on this back page. It's the last one. So make sure you go vote the whole thing, postmark it by the 7th or drop it off by the 8th.
And I would
And
just
Mayor?
say, this is a unique opportunity. And we last even talked about, it didn't even make it to the ballot, a measure like this in 2015. And the politics at the time ended up pulling it, and it didn't see the light of day on your ballot. We haven't built a regional park in over 60 years. These are really, really generational projects. So without advocating for or against it, it is a unique opportunity for voters to decide if this is an investment that we want to make as a community. And I hope, as Council Chair and Tom said, just vote. No matter how you vote, please vote on this issue, which is the only directly city-related issue on a Salt Lakers ballot.
So I want to thank everyone who participated in this event, especially those of you on Facebook. Your questions were great, and they really helped educate all of us and everyone else who will be watching this video in the future. You'll be able to find it on YouTube or later on Facebook to watch. I'd also really like to thank our city representatives for answering questions about the bond. Mayor, Council Chair Tom, this has been really helpful. For more information about the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond, please visit slcparksbond.com. If you want to email for more information and ask about that, you can email parksbond@slc.gov.com. You can follow SLC Public Lands on social media or ping SLC.gov across social media. And if you want to even call and talk to someone and have your questions answered that way, you can call 888-556-0232. Lastly, we just invite everyone to register to vote and to vote on or before November 8th. In-person early voting begins today, October 25th, at locations in Salt Lake City. Mail-in ballots must be postmarked by November 7th and returned to a vote center or drop box. Additional voting information can be found at slc.gov/elections. And so thank you all for joining us. Like I said, I'm Brian Young with SLC TV, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Brian.